Howdy, howdy, and thanks for tuning into episode 120 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. My name is Greg Lindberg. Here on this episode, we are recapping the 2024 National Beat Baseball Association season and the recent NBBA World Series, which wrapped up just the other day in the St. Louis, Missouri area. And to do so, we have a longtime member of the NBBA who played beat baseball for many years and has since gone into covering the sport in a variety of ways. So let's go ahead now and whip out the bat, hit the field, take out the pin from the beat baseball to get it beeping, and get swinging with episode 120 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. All right, so my guest here on this episode of Eyes Free Sports is David Benney, and some know him as DB as well in the beat baseball community. David is a longtime member of the NBBA, a longtime player, and I know second vice president as well now of the NBBA, and just a fire hose, I like to say, of knowledge when it comes to beat baseball. So we're going to chat with David here about just his background, but also focusing on the 2024 National Beat Baseball Association World Series and season in general. David, DB, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Greg.
Absolutely. I know you've been on my list for a long time and thought it was definitely appropriate now to have you on just as the World Series wrapped up here pretty recently. And just your knowledge, like I mentioned earlier, you're just such a wealth of knowledge, walking encyclopedia when it comes to beat baseball. So definitely honored to finally chat with you here.
Well, I appreciate that, and I've listened to Eyes Free Sports on and off for a while now, especially your beat ball and goal ball related shows, and so it is kind of neat that I'm a guest on your show tonight.
Awesome. I definitely appreciate your support and your listenership. So, DB, why don't we just kick things off here with just your background, as far back as you want to go, if you want to just tell us kind of where you're from and your early years.
I was raised, grew up in the Chicago area, west suburbs, really. Attended for a few years in my youth, and then as a senior in high school, the Illinois School for the Visually Impaired down in Jacksonville, Illinois, not far from the capital in Springfield. I was diagnosed with Leber's congenital amaurosis. That's the diagnosis. Although, we've traced vision loss back in our family as far as we can go, both sides, multiple generations. We can't find anybody else in the family that had symptoms of Leber's, at least not to my extent. I was born with light perception, so I can tell light from dark, but it's not really usable vision. And as far as I'm aware, it has never improved nor worsened over, I just turned 42. So that is, my early story. I discovered sports as a young age. I discovered radio at a young age. I was a fairly rambunctious little kid, athletic, but also maybe hard to manage sometimes. And so one of the tools that my parents used was the radio. And this is back before we had satellite radio. And so it was mostly hometown Chicago sports broadcasts. And so I was sort of raised on that.
Interesting. And definitely a lot of history, obviously, when it comes to Chicago sports. I think of the Cubs, the Bulls, certainly the Bears.
Well, I grew up in the heyday of the Michael Jordan era in Chicago. And
Sure.
So maybe I grew a little bit of an affinity over the years for dynasty teams, but because, we lived in Chicago. Now, I was a closet San Antonio Spurs fan, which was part of the impetus to go down and play down there for a few years in my beat ball career and actually wear David Robinson's number 50. But, in Chicago, you were supposed to be crazy about the Bulls, and we were. And it was a privilege to be able to live in that kind of generation in Chicago. But I was, above all things, a Chicago White Sox fan. And
yep.
I still am, although it's not quite as fun anymore. Not right now, anyway.
Right.
But back then, John Rooney, who is now the St. Louis Cardinal play-by-play, and has been for the last nearly 2 decades. But John Rooney and the late, great Ed Farmer were calling White Sox games. And that took up a good part of my summer and early fall when they were winning.
Sure. Interesting. How about Harry Carey? Did you kind of have an affinity at all for Harry Carey? I know he was obviously the Cubs announcer there for a while, but...
early on, I remember the Cubs run in 1989 and losing to the Giants in the playoffs. And I remember Harry and the Take Me Out to the Ball Game. It was probably one of the first songs I ever learned.
Yep.
My mama probably tells stories about me singing it as a very young boy. And I would say probably before the age of 10, I probably went to more Cub games at Wrigley than White Sox games at what was then Comiskey Park. But once I hit my teenage years, I was Chicago White Sox all the way. And of course, finally in 2005, they won it all. And, one of my greatest sports moments as a fan was the White Sox clincher in the 2005 World Series, which happened to be the last meaningful game that John Rooney and Ed Farmer ever called together, because, of course, the very next year he went down and joined the Cardinals broadcast team. But he was certainly one of my idols growing up, if you will.
Sure.
Along with Wayne Larrivee, who did the Bears. And, there was Harry. And then, of course, Pat Hughes was still around for the Cubs. And those were the ones I really remember the most.
Right. Gotcha. So I know you did mention attending the School for the Visually Impaired, at least for a few years here and there. And so in terms of your education beyond that, just talk to me about your pursuits, higher education-wise.
Well, the first 3 years of high school, I attended Willowbrook High School in the suburbs of Chicago. I was a wrestler on their team, which was a pretty elite team back in those late 90s years. And so I was probably an average wrestler on that team. I mean, we had state champions and we had Division I athletes on that team. But I got a lot of attention, whether deserved or not, because I was a blind public school wrestler. And that's actually where beat baseball started, because somebody in Chicago saw a newspaper article covering one of our meets or tournaments, I don't remember which, up there, and recruited me into beat baseball. But anyhow, I went down to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, intending to go into a career in radio, in broadcasting, and I got my bachelor's degree in radio, television, broadcasting. So about 3 years into my undergraduate, I started to get a little bit anxious about, after graduation, what the future was going to hold for me in that industry with a degree. I did not want to be the kind of visually impaired student who graduated with honors and then couldn't land a job in my chosen field. And remember, this is the early 2000s, just after the turn of the century, when the industry was changing. It was going from analog to digital. It was going automated. The technology was changing. The assistive technology was still catching up. I mean, this is when Gold Wave was brand new, okay? And so,
Right.
For example, and that's really wasn't considered industry standard, although it was a good tool for audio production if you couldn't see. I mean, the professors would let you get by with it, but they wanted you to learn Pro Tools. They wanted you to learn some of these more modern stuff. So I decided to take the law school entrance test. did well enough on it to attract some offers, and one was to stay at SIU Carbondale, and which I did gladly, and graduated law school. Took the bar exam in Illinois in 2008. Actually, finished it on a Wednesday afternoon, went straight to Midway Airport from the hotel where it was being administered. Took a flight down to Houston and joined the Indy Thunder, who were in the midst of our World Series in 2008 down there. And promptly went out on Thursday morning and got knocked out by Boston in extra innings. I'll never forget it. But, the fact that we were able to do both was still cool. So became an attorney, left the broadcasting profession behind, at least formally, and I've been working in the legal profession ever since.
Wow. Very interesting. And being a blind attorney, just any tips and tricks you use, any kind of secrets, secret sauce that you have to succeed in your profession?
That's a great question. If I was talking to a wannabe, as I call it, or a law student, wannabe attorney who is blind, I would first of all tell her or him, don't do it the way I did. Don't go and hang your flag right off the get-go. Work for somebody. If you have the skills, don't let them bury you in an office in some agency, okay, to fill out some list. But, they don't teach you how to be a lawyer when you're training to be one. And they certainly don't teach you how to do it if you can't see what you're doing. But it's doable. I've been blessed and at some points probably fortunate, especially early on. So that's number one. Secondly, and maybe most importantly, if you do decide to open up your own practice, be able to pay somebody who can work for you, who is trustworthy, reliable, highly literate, because you can and need to use the assistive tools and technology that's available. But for speed and efficiency purposes, it is better to pay a wingman than it is to fall behind your peers. Because if you're going to be competitive in the field, nobody's going to care that you have excuses why you can't get the job done as quickly, as efficiently, or as cost effectively. They'll just go down the road and hire one of your peers. And then you don't get paid. And if you can't attract private clients, judges will have less faith in your abilities when it comes to appointing you to cases that require an attorney to be appointed, and you won't make money, and you have to earn a living. We want to help and be public servants as much as we can, and work for the greater good. That's one of our ethical principles. But like any other profession, it's a business, and you got to be able to get paid. And then the third thing, watch your circle of friends. There are two types of lawyers. There are lawyers who hang out with other lawyers, and there are lawyers who hang out with their clients. And really, there's a third type. And those are lawyers who just choose to not hang out with very many people at all. You got to decide, and I'm not saying any is worse than the other, but you have to decide which type of lawyer that you want to be. Because if not, it's easy to get in trouble, frankly.
Right, absolutely. And I think what you said earlier is kind of a metaphor for, being successful as a blind or visually impaired person in general. Just there's a lot of things we can do, thankfully independently and with the technology, especially these days, but sometimes we do have to lean on others.
And here's the last thing I'll say about that,
Sure.
Greg, is project confidence. Even if you aren't necessarily feeling that way and something else is screaming in your head, project confidence, because if you do that, that the people that you deal with will be more likely to have confidence in you. Confidence doesn't mean arrogance or rudeness, but it does mean, even if you're walking into court for the very first time, try to walk in there like you know what you're doing, even if you don't. All right?
So true.
Most judges won't let you mess up too bad, not publicly. So, go in there and act like you know what you're doing. Maybe you'll even get lucky and get it right. And there's my tutorial for young lawyers. That really applies, blind or not blind, but it's especially important to us because most of the people you're going to deal with, unless you're in a disability-specific area of the law, are likely to be people who have never met a blind person before, let alone paid you to look after their freedom, their property, some sort of a right, or whatever, your contract, whatever it may be. They've never met a blind person before, let alone had to put all their trust in them as their fiduciary. And they may not meet another blind person again. That goes for the other lawyers you work with. So you may be their first and only impression, and God forbid it's a bad first impression. What happens when I come along 10 years later, want to work with that same lawyer, and that lawyer's like, oh my God, the last time,
Sure.
So there it is.
Right. Hey, definitely appreciate just your honesty with all that, and definitely great advice for everyone that can be applied, I think, to anybody, a lot of those skills and that insight. So then moving on to beat baseball. So I know you have played with a few different teams over the years. So if you want to just kind of provide an overview of your career and highlights and anything you'd like to mention.
Broke in with the Chicago Comets in 1999. Actually was asked to come out in 1998. But as I recall, it was a pretty busy summer. And so, I wasn't enthusiastic enough about it. I had seen it played. I had experienced it played at the School for the Visually Impaired when I was in grade school. But my memory of it was off a tee. And I'm sorry, even making noise, with a beep, wasn't really interested at that point in my life in playing t-ball. I'd have rather wanted us, my sister or a friend to pitch a beach ball to me with one of those big wiffle bats and try to knock the heck out of it. And we did. But in 1999, they talked me into coming out. I'm sort of off a third generation tree, if you will. A man named Roger Keeney out in Ithaca, New York at the time, back in the late 80s, recruited a gentleman, a young kid at the time, named Mike McGlashan, who's now a Hall of Famer in beat baseball, and recruited him. And then Mike McGlashan, who was by 1999 in Chicago, working and living, recruited me. Helped recruit me. Dave Smoka was a big part of that as well. Joe Wood, who's no longer with us, who was president of the league back in those days or around those days. So they recruited me. I got to travel with the team to Taiwan in 2000. Had a pretty good World Series on the field there and played with the Comets until I started college at SIU. And then I played for Darnell Booker and the Indy Thunder when he had first started the team, when they were in their infancy, for about 6 years while I was in college and in grad school. Then a couple of years back with the Comets. By now, this was JT Herzog coaching the team. And then helped form a team, or was at least a charter member of an Indy team that popped up called the RHI Indy Extreme, which was RHI was the Rehabilitation Hospital of Indianapolis. We were one of their programs. And so was a part of that team for a while. back to the Thunder, and then spent my last 4 years as a player with the San Antonio Jets when they formed. That was Kevin Simpson's team, and have been doing media work first for the Indy Thunder and then for the league ever since.
Right. Wow, quite a diverse career, and a lot of different opportunities, I'm sure, a lot of different tournaments around the country. Any specific memories just from your playing days that stand out?
I guess my favorite memories from my playing days, the early days with the Thunder when we were first forming, when, Darnell Booker and Ron Brown and myself and a couple other of the more dedicated, when we would, stand out in the rain at spaghetti fundraisers, trying to sell raffle tickets and just trying to raise every dime we could to try to get everybody there. Because I was in college. I didn't have the money without asking my parents back then to go play beep ball all over the country. And so, with what that organization has accomplished since, that's always one of my favorite memories, was in the early years while they were still building. The days with the Jets, especially the first year when I was still a starter on the team, and making the 2-hop play on Lupe Perez coming across the middle to end Austin Blackhawks championship defense and put the Jets into a semifinal. That was one of the greatest plays I've ever made. And so that was a memory just because of what it did for the Jets team. Plus, that was sort of my last DB moment, if you will, as a player, because my playing time declined after that, and lack of practice and so forth. And I retired as a player after the 2019 season. And then on the sidelines, of course, the drive for 5 and Corey White's championship winning walk-off home run in Wichita. I called that game on the Thunder broadcast. And that's probably the most incredible, exciting moment I've ever witnessed in beat baseball.
Sure. Yeah, I was lucky enough to be there. That was actually the last World Series I participated in and attended, and did catch that championship game, and that was pretty special.
Yeah, it was. And then, of course, he repeated it not with a home run, but with a walk-off run in last year's championship game. He's the only player to ever do that.
That's right.
And one of my most treasured pieces of beat ball memorabilia, because I have quite a bit of it now, that I've collected over 25 years around the game, is Corey White's home run jersey, if you will, a championship jersey in 2021. It's going to go into the Hall of Fame one of these days.
Wow. Very cool. So then transitioning on to this year, to 2024, so definitely want to get into this season and this World Series that just wrapped up here recently. So if you just want to kind of set the stage, the off-season moves, kind of what things looked like going into this 2024 campaign.
Oh, man. Well, it was a great season. It was a long season. The first tournament was in March out in Las Vegas. And then there was at least one tournament going on somewhere in the country every month all the way up until last week. And so there was as much, if not more, ball played across the country than I've seen in a very long time, if ever. The big shakeup going into the 2024 season was that due to a chain of events, the San Antonio Jets weren't able to field a team this year. Now we're talking about a team that's been runner-up to the world champions the last 4 years going into this year. And so they had a lot of star power on that team. And those that were healthy, several of them went and looked for other teams to play for. And, the Gateway Archers, who hosted this year's World Series, or at least their parent organization did, they were the beneficiaries of that in a way because two of the San Antonio players and then another player from the then world champion Indy Edge signed on with the Archers. So they became immediately stronger and a contending team. And then the Indy Thunder picked up a couple of would have been Jets, and so they sort of were beneficiaries of that. The incoming rookie class, and the official stats just came out today from the World Series. I haven't had an opportunity to go through all of them. But the incoming class of rookies this year was as deep and talented as any I can remember. Probably 2016 maybe would have been similar. And so teams like Bayou City, the Heat, and Boston, and even Gateway improved their rosters, with incoming rookies, which is great. Shuffling players in and out of teams throughout the league doesn't grow the sport. Bringing in new blood and talented young athletes, that's what grows the sport, and that's what's going to perpetuate it. And so we got a bunch of them this year.
Sure. Definitely exciting too. Just I feel like for the future of the sport and to keep it healthy, what'd you say?
Sure. We've got players that I've seen come in this year that I think love the game enough now. They could be around for decades. I just watch an 18, 19-year-old rookies hitting home runs, making plays that I wouldn't have made my rookie year, and just generally having a blast. There were rookies who performed in high-impact situations this year. The first tournament I attended in person down in Norman, Oklahoma, a young man I had never seen till that day scored a game-winning run for Houston. I think it was against New Jersey. And then did it the next day again in a placement game.
Wow.
So there were impact players that were rookies, not just prospects that were developing. There were a few of those too. But there were players who were starters and who made an impact, and they're going to be around the game for a long time, and that's good. We need it.
Sure, absolutely. So then entering the World Series, what would you say the expectations were? If you just kind of want to run through, the top teams heading into St. Charles, the St. Louis area for the series.
The Indy Thunder and Gateway Archers, in my mind, were the favorites. And when the teams were seeded for the World Series, they were the top two seeds, respectively. And the defending champion, Indy Edge, were the 3 seed. And then you had the BSO Philly Fire out of Pennsylvania. Now, I think most of us thought that those 4 teams were sort of separated from the rest of the pack in terms of competitive level. And I would have told you that the Philly Fire had a puncher's chance going in, but they'd had injuries, player unavailability for whatever reason, and just so much adversity. They were playing well at the end of the season, the Philly Fire were. They won their East Coast tournament, but I wasn't sure what to expect from them, but you knew if they came out at full strength and played like they were capable, that they had a fighting chance. But I don't think any of us outside of the Philly team would have said they're the favorites to not only win it, but to run the table without any losses, which is what they did. They went 8-0. If you had asked me before the World Series, I thought it was going to be Gateway and the Thunder, and whichever team showed up on Saturday would win it. And it almost was, but they ended up meeting in the third place game or elimination bracket final on Friday afternoon, as it were. But that was my expectations going in, along with it was going to be a defensive tournament. And that part was right. It certainly was. Scores were cut in half on average from last year in Norman. And game times were cut down significantly because of that, because the grass was thicker, the ground was softer in St. Charles, Missouri, and so they were just generally more defensive fields.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And then, so just in terms of, kind of the early games, early on, any surprises, anything that stood out to you early in the tournament?
From the first 2 days, nothing. In fact, there were 30 games played in what we call pool play. They split the teams into 5 brackets or groups, if you will, of 4. Like Olympic sports almost, and how they do the prelims. And so everybody played 3 games on Tuesday. So there were 30 games total. Out of that 30 games, there was only 1 game where the lower seeded team won, and that was the 5 versus the 6. And that was a couple of run margin in a game of the day game that we called, Rosina and I, for the NBBA. And other than that, everything was chalk. Pretty much the same thing on Wednesday. On Thursday morning is when we started seeing upsets. And the biggest one was the Philly Fire, the 4 seed, knocking off the top seed, Indy Thunder. And what was a really good game. The Thunder didn't strike out very much at all this week. In fact, they may have set a modern record. We're still looking to see if we can find any team better contact percentage at the World Series in the last 25 years anyway.
Wow.
But they had a couple of key strikeouts late in that game against the Fire that I think they would tell you cost them. And they lost a starter on Wednesday in a pregame injury collision, if you will, in fielding drills. So that was the big upset. And then, while I won't call them necessarily upsets, 2 teams on Thursday morning got their first wins ever at a World Series. The Boston Strong, brand new team, first time they've been to the World Series, and Sirens Beatball, our all-women's team, got their first win at a World Series and the first win by any all-women's team in a regulation World Series game in the 47-year history of our league. So it was kind of an exciting morning on several fronts on Thursday morning.
Sure. Yeah. And I did have several members from the Sirens on this podcast several months back, and definitely huge shout out to them. Just such a historic moment, I feel like, in our league.
Yeah, they did it. They won 2-1. 2 different players scored runs, and then their top defensive player made a handful of putouts at least. And so they beat Darren Keeper's SGV Panthers, and who had beat the Sirens in Las Vegas earlier in the year. So, they were ecstatic. I didn't see them after that game because we were broadcasting, but I saw them after their game on Friday. And had lunch with a few of them, and they were over the moon, and so are we. That's to be proud of. Wave to the future.
No doubt. Yep.
And I'll tell you something else. There were we run something in the NBBA called the Cool Clinic, or Kids of Our League, and we had over 30 young girls and boys out starting on Monday night for the actual clinic. But then throughout the week, there were young girls who saw that Sirens team play, win or lose, that, saw that, hey, I might want to do this. And so, that they won a game, great, but the fact that they were competing is going to draw new blood to the sport.
Absolutely. That's a great little anecdote right there, and just shows, the impact that a team like that, a group like that, could really have.
Oh, yeah. And the Missouri School for the Blind, they had kids out there all week. I know the St. Louis Lighthouse is very involved in camps, sports camps, and a bunch of things out there. So is Mind's Eye Radio. So I'd never seen more visually impaired young people out. When we were kids, it reminded me of the old Lions camps back in the day, the summer camps,
right.
where a bunch of us would just get together and play sports all day long. And so it seemed like they were having a blast.
Yeah, that's such a great program that the NBBA puts on, that cool clinic. So then transitioning on to Friday, I know it was kind of the semifinal day, kind of the big day to set up, setting the stage for the championship. If you just want to kind of walk our listeners through that.
Friday at the NBBA World Series is always fun, okay? Because by the time you start Friday morning, you've only got 6 teams now left in the hunt. Everybody else is or has already played their placement games. So you got 6 left. 2 of them are still in the championship bracket, and meaning they haven't lost a game yet in the double, because it's double elimination. Again, think Olympics. I always think of Olympic hockey when it comes to that, but then we have double elimination after instead of single. But at any rate, so you start with 6 on Friday. So you got 2 elimination games, and then you've got 1 championship bracket game. And the winner of that championship bracket game is on to the championship game on Saturday. The loser of the 2 elimination games, they play one another, and then the loser of that game is declared 4th place. The winner of that game then plays the loser of the championship bracket game, who drops back down. And then the loser of that game is eliminated in 3rd place, and that's how you get down to 2. So if you keep winning, your road is shorter, of course. For teams that are in that elimination bracket, they have to win 3 games on that Friday. 3 games. And then if they want to win the championship, they got to turn around and win 2 the next day. It's very difficult, not unprecedented. The Thunder won 7 in a row with their backs to the wall in 2017 to win the championship in Florida. But it's rare. So you have a leg up if you're in that championship bracket. So what you had the championship bracket game was the Fire and the Archers. Neither one of them had lost. And the Fire won it. The Archers had the lead going to the 5th, and then the Philly Fire exploded. I think they scored a dozen runs in the 5th inning and won the game 17-10, if memory serves right, or 18-10, somewhere thereabouts. And so that dropped the Archers down to a must-win game with the Indy Thunder, who played back 2 games and won them both. And that game was probably one of the top 5 games I've seen at a World Series, aside from a few championship games. That game was incredibly well played. The Indy Thunder team lost the game 21-20 to the Archers. The Archers came back with 6 runs in the bottom of the 6th inning. We have 6 innings in regulation beat baseball game to take the game. Mark Morris, who's one of, if not the best all-around player in the game today, scored the winning run in front of a massive crowd, both in person and on our live stream. The place went up for grabs for him, and it was just a real special moment in our sport. The Indy Thunder scored 20 runs. They had 38 batters come to the plate in that game, Greg. They didn't strike out a single one. We call it a perfect game. It's the first perfect game I've ever seen in a losing effort, and it's also the most batters to the plate, the most plate appearances in one game without a strikeout. Absolutely amazing. In other words, the Gateway Archers defense had to make all 18 plays in the field. They weren't granted one freebie by Jared Woodard, who's had a 94.6, I want to say, contact percentage rate at this year's World Series. Imagine pitching to 100 blindfolded athletes and having 4 pitches to get them to swing and hit it in fair play, and only striking out 5 of them. That's what they accomplished. And they had more than 100 batters, of course, but which makes it even more incredible. But that's what they did, and they ended up coming in 3rd place because the Archers were just a little bit better.
Right. Wow. And I'm sure, just like you said, the scores were down in general this year, so that one definitely took the cake, I would imagine, in terms of run scoring, right?
That's a good call, because I do believe that was the highest scoring game combined by both teams in the entire tournament. Yep.
Yep. Amazing. And yeah, definitely shout out to Jared Woodard, longtime B-ball pitcher, multiple championships to his name. So what an amazing achievement.
Wow. And the coaching on both sides, Orlando Gonzalez, I think, was masterful in inserting people in and out of the lineup in leverage situations, and using 3 or 4 players off of his bench late in the game when he needed to. And I think the Indy Thunder, with the way they were conducting their defense, which they always do. I mean, they're a well-oiled machine of an organization. So Darnell Booker and Jared Woodard were doing their thing. Mike Curtis and Orlando Gonzalez were doing their thing. The stars were shining. It was just an awesome game to broadcast and be a part of.
Sure. It definitely gives me some chills just with your description of that and painting that picture.
Me too, as we sit here talking about it now, and I'm thinking about it now 5 days after it happened.
Right. Wow.
And all of the Game of the Day film is available on demand on the NBBA Facebook PR page. So all of these games are available. They're also on YouTube. And they are going to, I'm sure, appear other places too, as we go forward and get some editing done and things of that nature.
Right. Absolutely. So then in terms of the championship game, so it was the Philly Fire, the BSO Philly Fire, I should say, taking on the hometown Gateway Archers, this tournament being essentially in their backyard.
Great crowd, huge crowd again, even though it's a 9:30 start Central Time to the game. And the reason they do that is because, of course, in this case, if the Archers had won the first game, already having 1 loss, then they would have had to play the if necessary game right after that. So they've moved up the start time in recent years to accommodate the schedule in case they had to play a second game, make sure they get them in. But even for that time of morning, it's a huge crowd. It's the first time that we had a local team involved in a championship game. Probably you'd have to go back to 2009 in Stockton, California, when the West Coast Dogs were at the peak of their dominance, to find a home crowd that got to cheer on championship Saturday. The Philly Fire were trying to be the first East Coast team ever to win a championship, believe it or not, since 1976, when they held their first World Series. There'd never been an East Coast team, never been a team east of Indianapolis. That's won the title. The Boston Renegades were runner-up in 2016, but that's the closest anybody had been. So
Wow.
The game was historic in a lot of respects. Also, it was the first time that you had a championship game that did involve a team from Indianapolis, the Edge of Thunder, since 2015 when Austin beat Taiwan. So you had a lot of nuances to that championship game that just made it really, really interesting as far as a matchup. Star power on both sides, speed, athleticism, defense, pitching. And I won't call the game itself a snoozer. However, the Fire had another one of their big innings. They put up 10 runs in the first inning, and the Archers never were really to be able to get into the game. They cut the lead down, but they never got it close enough that the crowd was really able to get into it and get behind them like they had the day before. They were trailing a lot of that game to the Thunder too, although it was nip and tuck. In this one, this one was never really in doubt. I think it surprised some people, not so much that the Fire won again and won the championship by that point, because they were playing the best deep baseball of any team there from Thursday on down the line. But I think it was surprising that the Fire won it as easily as they did.
Right. Good way to put it. I know when that string of runs started happening, I was like, darn it, was hoping for a nail biter, kind of like that 21-20 game the day prior. But you just never know. When a team gets hot and they get hitting, sometimes it's almost unstoppable.
All right, well, of course, you can't root from the press box, but I was hoping to see 2 games that day. Whoever won and whoever lost. I know people on both teams. I've got dear friends that are on both teams. But I wanted to see 2 games sort of selfishly. It had been a while since we had 2 games on Championship Saturday. 2018 was the last time, and when the Thunder were in the midst of their dynasty. But as it was, the Philly Fire did it. They became the first East Coast team in our league's history to win the championship. And they put several players on the All-Star team, the All-Tournament team, and so forth. So good for them. I mean, obviously, that's an unforgettable experience for them. The only player on their roster that I can think of right now, I tell you for sure, Tyler Rodriguez, the only Philly player with a championship ring. So it was pretty well new territory for the rest of them. And they earned it. They were the better team.
Right. And like you said before, they ran the table and maybe raised a few eyebrows along the way, but absolutely earned it.
Well, and they are at several positions relatively young, and they are mostly homegrown. Not all, but mostly either homegrown or they live in Philly now, like Tyler Rodriguez, who is such a big part of the Thunder teams and his 5 championships. Now he's got 6. I think he needs 1 more now to catch his brother. And don't think he doesn't know it either. But I'm very proud of the people on that team that worked so hard to do that. They had to overcome a lot of adversity. One of their top players had a shoulder injury in a local tournament, a regional, and we weren't sure what his status was going to be until a couple weeks before the World Series. Their star left fielder was banged up early in the season, and we didn't see much of him until late June. So there were some question marks. Now, they put any question to rest.
Absolutely, no doubt. And they do have a father-son combination that I thought was really interesting, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah. So Pat and Casey Krause, actually, they have a little history between them too now, besides winning a championship. They were the first father-son combo to connect for a home run, which is a 170-foot shot or greater on the fly. They did that in Las Vegas, and they've won a title together now. So Pat is the pitcher, and Casey, his son, is one of our star players. And then another son, Colin, is the catcher. So actually you've got a Krause connection, pitcher, catcher, and then one of their players. It's a real family-connected team. So then you've got Scott Hogwood, who's another one of their starters, and his daughters, 3 of them. One of them's a player, and one of the better women players we've got. And then 2 of them are field spotters. Jeff Rhines coaches that team, or at least he's announced his retirement after this season. He went out on top. And then his son, Justin, is their left fielder. John Margist, who's another player, and his missus, Gina, who's another one of our women of our league players. So there's a lot of family ties and family connections on that team.
Yeah, definitely really cool to see just those dynamics and how that all has kind of played out. Any other notable players? Anyone that really maybe stood out to you? Maybe a surprise, just in general from the World Series that you'd like to mention?
I mentioned that rookie class and how deep and talented I think it is this year. Noah Finney, who's one of the top rookies that I mentioned, he hit 2 of the 6 home runs at the World Series. The Heat team actually hit 4 of the 6 home runs. So there were 6 home runs at the World Series, and there were 3 double plays, and the same player made 2 of those 3 double plays, that being Randy George of the New Jersey Titans. And the 3rd double play was one that we called on our game of the day on Wednesday. And that was Tyler Rodriguez, and there's a real cool photo sequence of that play. Our social media specialist, John Lykowski from Lykowski Studios, just happened to snap off a good photo sequence of his play. And the way it's been described to me, it's about as good a play as you will ever see in the sport of beat baseball by a blindfolded player. A double play is a one-hopper, by the way. You catch a ball on a hop, it's considered a double play. If there are 2 outs, you still get credit for the double play, but your team only gets credit for the 1 out. It ends the inning. So he made this play on the move, caught it on 1 hop against his arm, held on to it, showed it. It's just amazing, amazing play. The longest home run, I think, was probably Noah Finney's first one. I think they said it went over 180. So even in the old days when the home run was 180 feet, it would have still been a home run.
Right.
So those were some of the highlights. I'm sure there are others, and they are all over. We've got video clips and photography all over our feed right now on our public relations page at NBBA 76 on Facebook. And I'm sure that there'll be some on our website, nbba.org, in the near future.
Absolutely. And I have to say the NBBA has just done a tremendous job capturing these games, whether it's, photography, whether it's the live streams. I feel like the coverage is really just grown by leaps and bounds, which is awesome to see. And speaking of the coverage, so I know you've alluded to the fact that you've been a commentator on a number of live streams, a number of broadcasts here over the last several years. And just talk to me about what you enjoy most about that, and your partner, Rosina Foster, I know you've worked with many times. And how is that relationship?
So what I do now, broadcasting and leading the stream team, for the NBBA is really sort of getting back to my first love. Now, I told you earlier, I was raised on sports radio. I was trained in broadcasting, and then life happened and took me down a different path. And I had sort of left it behind for a while. And then this cool little creation came out around about 2015, 2016, just as my career as a player was starting to wind down, in my mind, which was live streaming, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and all of these other non-traditional ways of delivering content that people like and they can watch from home. It's so awesome, man. I can't imagine back in my playing days having my games shown where somebody could just sit and watch it on their television or on their device and not have to actually make the trip out there. It was unthinkable to us. Nobody was going to televise our games. If we were lucky, we might get some audio of our championship game. Maybe a local radio station would pick it up, like WCRS, which was an old station out of Ohio somewhere, had a few of our World Series back in the day. So it was a treat. Other than that, somebody show up with a camcorder or something like that, maybe, and you could watch a little game film, but now it's everywhere. And so I fell in love with it right away. And I decided that I thought it was more fun for me at this juncture in my life to sit there and blah, blah, blah and talk about all of the greatness of the beat baseball that I was seeing than to actually compete in it anymore. And so thank God we have it, because it kept someone like me around the organization to pitch in and help out, and kept me motivated even after my playing days are over. And so that's kind of what started it for me. I was doing Indy Thunder games for quite a while during the later part of their dynasty run, and then was asked to and joined the NBBA social media and public relations team, and directed their stream team. And I've been doing that since. Rosina Foster, she's awesome. She's great, because the skill set she brings is pretty unique, and it's sort of a perfect match for mine. Rosina comes out of the audio description sort of side of broadcasting, not so much sports play-by-play. Now, she learned beat ball. Now she's an expert. But she is more into the audio description, and that's her strength, which is perfect. Not just for our audience, because we've got a significant number of blind and visually impaired who are our consumers of our media, but also for me, calling the game with her. Because I'm listening to her, and I'm listening to what's going on the field, because they're playing by ear, so I can follow it. And it helps me do a better job of being aware of what's happening in front of us. And so I think we complement each other very well. I almost have to keep myself from stepping on Rosina's description sometimes, because it is unique, some of the intricacies that she gives. And so I'll think it's time for me to start talking about the game, but she's describing what she's seeing as she's seeing it. And so she's being our eyes, literally. And so I enjoy working with her. I enjoy working with all of the partners I broadcast with. Now, the first one in a championship game was Kevin Simpson. because our team wasn't playing in the championship game. They asked us to do it. And if anybody ever heard a Kevin Simpson broadcast, he retired from the NBBA in 2021. But he was the master of NBBA play-by-play. Rosita's the master of audio description. She's pretty good at play-by-play, too. So working with her is awesome. Graham Mathena, who produces for us and does the camera work and all of the video and audio mixing and so forth. He's great to work with, and so we've got a great team.
Absolutely.
We've got scorekeepers that communicate with us when we need them to, as they're doing their job, which is scoring the game and keeping official stats. The umpires work with us great. Our tournament director this year, Cassie Hopkins, I worked with now for 2 years. I've leaned on her probably more than I have anybody else, and she's never failed. And she's never not been there when I've needed her. So we're a team. And if you enjoy our broadcasts, then that's the biggest compliment that you can give us.
Absolutely. Very well stated. And any other observations, just in terms of the World Series, the event, just kind of how it was hosted, how it was put on? I know personally I definitely want to give a shout out to Mind's Eye and Mind's Eye Radio. They've supported this podcast now for a while, and I know they were very instrumental in a lot of the just kind of behind the scenes preparation and hosting of the event. Tell you what,
Mind's Eye Radio and the St. Louis Lighthouse, they really know how to bring folks to the yard. I mean, so we started out with General Wilson at opening ceremony singing our national anthem. You might have heard him in NFL playoff games and high-profile basketball games and the like, because that's the same General Wilson, and his voice just soared and brought, I think, the tournament already up to a level that was, on fire before the first game even began. And then Jackie Joyner-Kersee, our local Olympian, who I watched run track when I was a kid, threw out the first pitch, the ceremonial first pitch. And so they brought them out at the beginning. Then we had Benji Molina,
Sure.
World champion from the 2002 Angels, and they played with several teams actually in his outstanding career as a major league catcher, and is now the Spanish color commentary voice for the Spanish broadcast for St. Louis Cardinals. And so he was out there for us on Saturday, along with other dignitaries. I mean, we'd be here for a while if we were to list them all. And so that's awesome that Mind's Eye Radio was able to do that. I hope hosting the World Series benefits their organization as much as them hosting it benefited our organization. They're going to do it again for us, Lord willing, next year. It's a symbiotic relationship. So you know what? If that helps them get bigger, and if that helps them increase what they can do in their programs, which are audio description, adaptive athletics, and of course a radio reading service and so forth, then, great for them. If the St. Louis Lighthouse can expand their programs for youth and for the blind and visually impaired, from helping host our World Series, wonderful. If some of our sponsors who bought ad space on our page or our live stream, if they get more business because of it, wonderful. St. Louis is a baseball haven in the United States, and so I can't think of a better place. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and nobody else, but I wouldn't mind seeing the World Series stay there as long as they're willing to have us. I haven't seen it done better.
Wow. Wow, what a testament after all these years, almost 50 years of having the event.
We've had some great World Series. In fact, I can't think of one that wasn't memorable to me for some reason or another. But the fields, the park, the hospitality, the Marriott Hotel, which was our host hotel, everything about it. Some of the side stuff that were provided. There was food provided to us from Raising Cane's, Jersey Mike's, Emo's Pizza. It was all around from beginning to end. I thought they knocked it out of the park.
Absolutely. Yep. And I know there was also, I believe, an audio-described Cardinals game, right?
Yes, there was. And unfortunately, I didn't get to go to that because, and I confess now that I'm rebounding, but I caught some sort of a little bug. And so I was conserving every ounce of voice and energy that I can muster to get through the last few games of the World Series and to complete our mission with the stream team. But I've heard nothing but good, positive things about the St. Louis Cardinals trip, and some people got to experience audio description at a ballpark at a baseball game for the first time. And that, when you think audio description, this is not putting on your headset and listening to John Rooney call the game. This is audio description of what's going on around you in the section, whether people are doing the wave, if there's stuff up on the big board, things of that nature, things that a blind or visually impaired person without somebody sitting next to them describing it to them might not get to enjoy. And so it's really a unique thing they do. And hopefully the national awareness now from that event may spread hopefully to other parts of the country and maybe in other places and in other ballparks, programs like that will start up. That's always the hope, Greg.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know I did do an episode a few months back on the audio description that Mind's Eye provides in general, but kind of with a focus on sporting events there in St. Louis. So just super excited to see that, come to fruition. And here in Florida, I'm actually working with a nonprofit that does audio description, for theater and whatnot, but hoping to help them get into sports as well. So before we do wrap up, so I know that you are now the second vice president of the National Beat Baseball Association.
Well, not yet. I would officially take office at our next scheduled board meeting on August 10th. So technically, I am the second vice president elect. And the primary duty of the second vice president is to direct the public relations department. Those positions are tied together along with overseeing equipment. And that has been the role of Richie Flores, my immediate superior in the public relations department of the NBBA for the last 2 years. He's done a tremendous job. If you think that we are in a better place media-wise than we were 2 years ago, Richie Flores has been a big part of that. He is planning on moving onward and upward. He is the NBBA president-elect, and so I will be sliding into his old position. And a lot of people recognize the name Richie Flores not only from Beat Baseball, but from his leadership work with the National Federation of the Blind on the national level. He's still the leader of their sports and recreation division. So we've got a bright future ahead of us, and we need to take advantage of every opportunity that knocks.
Absolutely. Great way to end it there.
I look forward to serving the organization in that capacity. And aside from that, I don't know that my public duties are going to change that much. I'll just be an executive officer, but I will still be DB, and I'll be very involved in our media.
Right. I see. Well, hey, congrats on, officially taking that office here very shortly, and look forward to your continued contributions. I know you're such an advocate for the game of beat baseball and the NBBA. So yeah, it's been an honor to have you on here on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Again, this is David Benney, aka DB, we've been chatting with, and I really appreciate the time, DB.
Hey, I really appreciate you having me. You've got a great show, and I always love talking beat baseball. It is my passion, and so I give of myself to it freely.
Excellent. Alrighty. Thanks again. To hear more episodes of the Eyes Free Sports podcast and to subscribe, search for Eyes Free Sports on your favorite podcast platform or visit eyesfreesports.com. Be sure to follow the Eyes Free Sports podcast at facebook.com/eyesfreesports and on Twitter at eyesfreesports.